Now, what is so special about Glacier Girl? Well, first of all, it never made it into combat. It was on its way, flying across Greenland. The pilots got lost in bad weather. They were forced to land on a glacier, and after 11 days, the men were rescued. The airplane's abandoned there. After the first winter time, gets covered up with snow and never to be seen again.
In 1942, one of the greatest adventures in aviation history began. Transporting aircraft to the European theater of World War II was a risky proposition. The German Wolfpack roamed freely in the North Atlantic. The odds of a successful ocean crossing were thin, but these aircraft were desperately needed in England. Military leadership came up with a plan, Operation Bolero. The plan was essentially to continent hop from Presque Isle, Maine to Goose Bay, Labrador, Greenland, Iceland, and finally to the British Isles. It was possible, but risky. Many things could go wrong. Weather reports were slow, inaccurate, and hampered by the German Luftwaffe that would send false reports to confuse pilots and forecasters. Radio reception was subject to unpredictable fade-outs. The host airstrips were only 30% completed in April of 1942. Route proximity to the North Pole would affect compass readouts. On June 1, 1942, the first aircraft made it to England with no losses. 3 groups were assigned to the first phase of movement: the 97th Bomb Group, flying B-17 Flying Fortresses, the 1st Fighter Group, flying P-38 Lightnings, and the 60th Troop Carrier Group, flying C-47 Skytrains. On July 15, 1942, 6 P-38s of the 94th Fighter Squadron, 1st Fighter Group, and 2 B-17s of the 97th Bomb Group set out on their mission. On the Greenland to Iceland leg, they were forced by weather to attempt to return to Greenland. Running low on fuel, all 8 aircraft emergency landed on the Greenland ice cap. The first P-38, piloted by Brad McManus, landed wheels down. It was thought that the ice pack was solid enough to support a traditional landing.
Brad McManus was a P-38 pilot, and he tells the story about him, landing the first time. Glacier looks nice and hard. They received a briefing before they left saying that it may be possible to land on the glacier, but no, they didn't know because nobody had ever done it. Not knowing much about the composition of the glacier, and from the air it looks very hard, I know for a fact. And so Brad put his gear down, landing gear down, and attempted to land on the ice cap. Took Brad a couple of minutes to get out, but he really wasn't injured. Had a cut on one of his arms, but a very minor, small cut. And he was out. There's good from everything. Well, all the other guys seeing that, they said, well, we're not going to put our gear down and land, so they all belly landed the airplanes in.
All the crew were eventually found and made their way to a base on the Greenland coast for evacuation. All 8 aircraft were abandoned on the ice. Lost, but never forgotten.
They're all gone now. All of the men from the lost squadron have passed on. Brad was the last one of the pilots.
To understand the story of Glacier Girl, one must first understand why the P-38 Lightning has such a mythic appeal as a fighter aircraft.
P-38's the only fighter that was American U.S. fighter that was in production before, during, and after World War II. It was designed by Kelly Johnson, Lockheed, And it was such an unusual airplane to look at that it captured everybody's imagination. Had a sterling war record. First flew in January 27th of 1939, before the war. And we entered the war. It was first deployed in the European theater, then later it was deployed in the Pacific. America's leading ace, Richard Bong, got all his kills flying the P-38. America's second leading ace, Thomas McGuire, got his kills all flying the P-38. Admiral Yamamoto was shot down by a squadron of P-38s, but it was actually a Navy operation, and the Navy did not have any aircraft that had the range.
The twin-boom, twin-engine, turbo-supercharged design allowed clustering of all the armament in the nose. This setup made the Lightning a formidable air-to-air platform. All the firepower could be focused directly on the center line of the aircraft, unlike single-engine fighters where the area of gun convergence from the outboard wing locations limited the effectiveness of the firepower. Nicknamed the Forked-Tailed Devil by the Luftwaffe and two planes, one pilot by the Japanese, the P-38 was used in a number of roles, including dive bomber, level bombing, ground attack, photo reconnaissance, and long-range escort fighter.
Yeah, the P-38, holds its own in the combat arena. There's no doubt about it.
Quite frankly, Pat and I thought we would go up there, take a shovel and a broom, sweep the snow off the wings, put gas in the tank, pull them out, crank them up, and fly them off. The search for the lost squadron of Operation Bolero began in the 70s. It was the dream of Epps and Taylor to find and recover at least one of the original 8 aircraft. What they did not count on was the amount of snowfall and especially the glacier drift that would take place over 50 years.
In 1992, a guy named Roy Schaffner, he signed on with GES as the financial backer for the expedition. And at that point there, Pat asked me if I would like to be the project manager for it. At that time it was called the project coordinator. And I agreed to. He said, well, we'll bring you on in February. I'll start on February 18th. Good. The plan was to recover 3 airplanes. We were very fortunate to recover 1.
A group of 40 people, led by Kentucky entrepreneur Roy Schaffner, returned to Greenland and burrowed through 268 feet of ice to reach one of the Lockheed P-38s and bring it up piece by piece to the surface. On July 15, 1992, several of the pieces were flown to Oshkosh to be displayed at AirVenture.
When the airplane landed on the Glacier, it was 62 days old. It had 74 hours of flight time. It landed there, hadn't been touched, it hadn't been modified in the field. It was brand new aircraft. Landed there, men rescued, snow covers it up, comes a time capsule. We recover it 50 years later. It's still brand new, even though it's crushed.
A decade later, on October 26, 2002, after thousands of hours of work, the P-38 they recovered, now dubbed Glacier Girl, took flight once again.
Bob had told me that there's going to be 25 or 30,000 people there when it does its first flight, and I said, yeah, whatever, sure. I was thinking there might be a couple hundred people or, on a good day there might be 1,000 people or something, you know, because the airplane had quite a following from all its notoriety. So I figured it'd be popular, but he was right. Come the day ready to fly it, I mean, that week leading up to it, there's people everywhere, and it was just like an air show when the day we flew it. The airport boundaries were completely packed with people, and police had to move people off the end of the runways and maintain crowd control.
Well, I told him 20,000 people. He didn't believe me. So he had a dirty flight suit. I don't know if he told you that. He said, man, if I know where all these people are going to be here, I had a clean flight suit. So what we have is the only true, you can go look at that airplane, and it's a 1942 airplane. It's exactly as it was that left the factory in 1942. And I think, you know, that's a pretty significant fact. The fact that you can have an airplane, that's exactly what the young men that were flying those things back in World War II, this is what they were flying. This is exactly what they were flying. Your father could have jumped in that airplane that looked just like that. I mean, exactly. We are just about out of World War II veterans to tell their stories. And, you know, in another 10 years, there won't be any World War II veterans around. There may be one or two, but it won't be a lot. So what are we going to have to tell the story of how we have the freedoms, you know, that we have today? With the equipment and with the tools that they used, right? And that's what makes Glacier Girl so historically significant, and why it was well worth the time and the effort to take that airplane and make it, you know, exactly as it was as it left the factory in '42.
In 2007, under the stewardship of new owner Rod Lewis, Operation Bolero II was launched. It was an attempt to complete the original mission and show Glacier Girl at the world-famous Duxford Air Show in the United Kingdom.
The biggest hurdle is just keeping these 65-year-old airplanes in the air and the engines running and all the systems working.
We've asked the tower if we can. We've requested a takeoff and come back around and just the two of us.
Steve Hitton would pilot Glacier Girl. Ed Shipley would fly Miss Velma, a P-51 being delivered to Stephen Gray, and Rod Lewis would pilot the Pilatus support aircraft. The expedition left Middlesboro, Kentucky on June 21st, bound for Teterboro, New Jersey. After a well-attended press conference, the aircraft left for Presque Isle, Maine. Where it was met with a huge reception from local residents.
This guy, I met him in Middlesboro, Kentucky 4 years ago. He is the project officer that brought this aircraft up out of the ice in Greenland, and the project officer that helped put it back together and restore.
When I was walking from the Pilatus back to the hangar there, and I walked by Glacier Girl, I heard something. And it was, boy, it feels good to be back in the first time. 65 years later.
Yeah.
You need to grow a little bit.
Obviously, that goes around your neck. This is supposed to go around your neck.
Tinky Winky or the other one.
So you can inflate the floor, which you want to do so you protect yourself from hypothermia. And then
After 2 days of cold weather survival training and weather delays, the team set off for Goose Bay, Labrador. The weather continued to worsen.
They gave us about a 10-mile final, then back into the soup again and shooting this ILS. Rod got it very well that time, and we come blowing out of the bottom of it. And suddenly there's the airport. Well, they've got construction. The runway we're lined up on is closed. And then the other runway is construction, like the first 3,000 feet. So Rod just kept going straight ahead. I was on the right wing. I broke off to the right. It was all briefed up. I broke off to the right, came back around and landed. Steve came back around and landed, and then Rod came in. We come in and we taxied. Here we are. And it was sporty. It was pretty sporty. What do you think this thing is doing to you as a pilot? This whole trip.
Well, I feel like, I'm first of all very fortunate to be flying with guys like Ed Shipley, Steve Hinton, and I learn every day on this trip.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is that I've realized as I sat off your wingtip is that there's a lot of trust involved in this whole operation.
Absolutely. Yeah, the comment that you made when we got out, we're a band of brothers now, there's never been a more accurate statement, I guarantee you. Because you learn to trust. You learn to trust in that guy next to you. Boy, I'll tell you, it was just, everything worked perfect. So.
Finally, on June 25th, after months of preparation, Operation Bolero II left Goose Bay, Labrador on the first over-ocean leg to Greenland. Luck would not have it. An hour out of Goose Bay, Glacier Girl began overheating. They were forced to turn back. The culprit, a cracked cylinder liner. Shipley in the Mustang and Rod Lewis in the Pilatus completed the trip. Glacier Girl would sit most of the summer in Labrador awaiting repairs. Once again, unable to complete her mission. Today, Glacier Girl flies as part of the Lewis Air Legends Living Flight Museum. Her mission is to instill a sense of pride, patriotism, and history wherever she appears. Flying alongside of some of America's greatest fighters from the past and present, she proudly holds her own in formation with Korean-era F-86s, F-4 Phantoms from the Vietnam era, or the most modern F-22 Raptor. All part of the extremely popular and emotionally uplifting United States Air Force Heritage Flight Program.
Sent down to a place called Mariba on the New South Wales, outside of Cairns, Australia. It's up in the wheat fields. There, we saw a P-38 for the first time, and so we all checked out on P-38 and learned how to feather the engines and the whole 6 ounces of whatever, but the rest of them all flew P-38s up to Port Moresby, and we landed there, and we flew off a place called 3 Mile, right on the coast of outside of Port Moresby.
But the stall characteristics on a P-38 were just out of this world. I mean, you pull back on the stick and the thing just upped, and then it went down, and then it went up, and it went down. And I loved that plane because then you could roll it over, you know, and roll it back and everything like that. That was what made it neat.
The P-38 we all had big grins on our face because we admired that airplane so much, and it was tricycle landing gear. And we'd never been in a tricycle landing gear before. We'd always had tail draggers. The P-40, I'm small, I couldn't see where I was going, you know, the wing and the nose up in front of it. But the P-38, you just sat up there, you had the whole universe at your command. Of course, the airplane was so well known and so popular, and we were, like I say, all of us had grins on our face. We were happy to be flying P-38s. But one thing we did at Chico, they called it skip bombing, and we practiced that. And I have to say myself, I thought I got pretty damn good at it. The reason was it was to be used against shipping, where you would come in to the side of the ship, and you drop the bomb would maybe even go a little under the water and go into the side of the ship and sink it.
Yes, today, some 70 years after her first flight, the P-38 Glacier Girl still puts a twinkle in a veteran's eye, a smile on an old soldier's face, and create dreams for a new breed of aviator. Questions remain. Will Glacier Girl be able to complete her original mission of flying to England? Will there be an Operation Bolero III? When flying formation with aircraft of her own time, one can almost sense Glacier Girl's desire to fulfill her primary mission, to lay the shadow of her wings in England and soar through the European sky.
Rod's commitment to aviation is amazing, and it goes beyond just the warbirds. He flies every day. The guys fly 600 hours a year. Not many CEOs can do that and do it well.
this individual airplane just means a lot. You know, there's a lot of interest, a lot of people. It's a story that has a beginning and now it's in the middle. You know, and I think he'll carry it on to the end. You know, and hopefully this thing will be around. You know, way after we're all gone. You know.
Yeah, we got the engines in Glacier Girl right now. Only got a couple hours on them, but they are sounding great. They're working well. The new coolers that we got for the radiators, for the coolant, working good. Steve says it's the best it's ever been. I would predict that if things keep going the way they are going right now, that yeah, there'll be a Bolero 3 next year.